guess, seeing as how it is now 7 o'clock, I will call this meeting of the Bylaw Study Committee to order. And as we are all remote, I will take a roll call. Mr. Courier.
He's here.
And Mr. Marr.
Here.
Mr. Langevin.
Present.
Mr. Jefferson. He's not going to answer because he's not here, but expect him here shortly. And Mr. Robbins is present. We have a quorum, and so we can proceed with our meeting. Our first agenda item, as usual, is public comment. I do not see any Zoom attendees from whom we can expect to receive any public comment. So we will consider that agenda item to have been completed for tonight. Next item would be the action item list. I think we have almost all of our responses either in hand or we have the stakeholders promising us that they've been working on it.
And they would try to pull as many strikes in a minute and a half. And whoever pulled more would go on and stuff, which was pretty cool. That'd be fun, but that wasn't that great insider.
Hearing somebody in the background.
What are we hearing?
Okay, it's gone now.
Thanks for coming from Skip.
Yes. So over the last couple of weeks, we've gotten a few more stakeholder responses emailed to us. I'm pretty sure they all got sent to all of us. I hate to think that I let another one drop into my mailbox without sharing it with all you guys. So we should be able to update the action item list with the additional responses. And we have some that are still to come. I know that the Affordable Housing Trust has this on their agenda for their meeting tonight. And Andy has been trying to collect input from the select board. I think there's a couple of others that I'm pretty sure we know are in. Oh yeah, and Evan is in progress with his. He is working on Article 20 and Appendix A. I had a discussion with Evan a few days ago, where he said he's almost done with what he wants to update with Article 20, the personnel bylaw. There's one element of that he's holding off on finalizing until he gets done with the GMEA contract negotiations. There's some details in there that once they agree to that, that'll help Evan complete his update to Article 20. Talk to them about Appendix A and that section of the charter that talks about the administrative code. And he really hadn't paid much attention to that before now. So he promised that he'd go take a look at that and discuss with town council exactly what he ought to be doing. And so he basically committed to working on Appendix A, so we can kind of know that there's some work in progress on that.
Yeah, and speaking of Appendix A, I think of the responses that we received, I believe the only one with any comments was Paul Canoyer's response, and he had some questions and comments on Appendix A, but I think everything else that we received in from stakeholders was them basically saying they didn't need any changes or see any necessary changes.
Right. Right. So we'll keep accumulating those stakeholders. Hopefully by the time of our next meeting 2 weeks from now, unless we decide to change that, hopefully by that time we will have received just about everything we can reasonably expect. According to the list I've been keeping, the only stakeholder from whom we've had no indication at all has been the economic development. And I wouldn't expect a whole lot from them anyway.
Have we heard anything from the new animal control officer?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, that's something I was looking at this afternoon. She had sent us a proposed update to the animal control section, Article 16, and she's got a lot of stuff in there things like updating from, terminology, replacing dog officer with animal control officer, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I think her response, her proposal covers almost everything I think that we've come up with so far on that section.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some related details, things like, I've been working on, and we're kind of getting into the next agenda item, talking about bylaw updates, but yeah, we got some good stuff from the animal control officer. I was very, I really hadn't looked at it in any detail until this afternoon, but it's gonna, she did come up with a number of questions, that we need to answer. I haven't collated those yet, but there's a number of questions, do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? And let me pause for a moment.
Skip,
do
I know you had
Andy
asked about that one
Tucker
in
has
the,
joined us.
Skip, I was just saying, I know you had asked about that one in the past, so I just forwarded you the response we had gotten from the ACO way back when.
Yeah, you
Okay,
had that.
that's what I was just looking through my email trail to see if I could identify it, because after I asked the question, I thought that I had asked before, and somebody said, "Hey, dummy, you must have missed it. It's in there someplace." So now
Yeah,
I
know
have it.
Brian had included that document in the spreadsheet as well. So
Okay.
yeah, we've got something to work with there.
Dave, in terms of folks we've heard back from, I know I think they were the one that you said hadn't been active for a while, but we didn't receive anything from the Agricultural Commission either, did we?
We did. Yeah, I have in my notes, I have that we received something from them back in November.
Okay.
And I
All right.
think they said that, if I remember right, it was one of these, we don't have any changes to suggest.
Okay.
So Andy, are you here?
I'm here.
So you're continuing to hopefully collect input from the rest of the select board on the bylaw revisions. Have you gotten anything more?
Matt sent me his draft copy, but said he would be sending along additional edits.
Okay.
I did email them all sometime last week to a reminder with William's email and every article that we requested they take a look at. So I take that back. Colleen has provided her feedback as well. So
Okay.
Are they going to individually make suggestions or as a board?
we're doing it well. Anne-Marie and I had started doing it individually, so then everybody followed suit, but we agreed that they would send their feedback to me. I'd consolidate it and then present it to everybody else at the review.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so according to my notes, stakeholder responses that are still in the works, not completed yet, are from the town administrator, which I mentioned earlier. He's busy working on Article 20 and Appendix A. The select board, which Andy is collecting, and hopefully will, if nothing else, guilt them into finishing up everything they want to do and get them to use so they can forward it to me. The Capital Improvement Planning Committee, I'm not sure where they're at. I thought I understood that they were going to discuss that at the meeting tonight, which
I thought so
Greg
too,
would
but
be
it's
in
not
if he
there.
was.
Yep.
Which I think Colleen promised me that it would be on the next agenda, but it's an easy thing to forget. But yeah, that's where Greg would be if he wasn't with us. Actually, Greg, you could have had two computers set up. You could be zooming in both meetings at the same time. And the Affordable Housing Trust that's got on their agenda for tonight. The Accessibility Advisory Commission, they are working on it as well. I think I reported at our last meeting there. They are requesting some input from one of their consultants regarding the accessible parking section of the bylaw, which it's desperately asking to be rewritten. But because it predates ADA, we're kind of hoping that we can do much less. We can either, we can significantly reduce it, within the bylaw. So that's kind of, I think, as far as I can tell, that's where we're at with the various stakeholder responses. And
The only other one that I had as open was town council.
oh yes, that reminds me that yeah, Evan is going to respond to the town council. Evan indicated he had talked with town council and she was not comfortable providing recommendations for bylaw changes. So Evan's going to take care of what we assign to town council.
Okay.
And with that, anything else on the action item list at this point?
So I'd say nothing else on this agenda item. I think when we get into other parts of the agenda, I've started to make some tweaks. I added a row basically to each article to assign one of us, whichever of us ends up owning that article. And so when we get down to, if we're divvying those up tonight, I could probably share and we could run through that. But outside of some general cleanup, there haven't been any other substantial changes.
Okay, good. And yeah, so that, I'll say that brings us into our next agenda item, which is sort of the major item for tonight, is to work on, continue talking about proposed bylaw updates. And as you just reminded us, Brian, I think at our last meeting, we kind of said that this meeting we will assign pretty much all the bylaw articles to, committee members for doing the work. No, there are some that for which no changes are requested, but other than those, I know some of us have already worked on some or are working on some, but that's one of the things we want to do, I guess. And I don't know if you want to do that now or, talk about some other stuff and sort of wrap it up by everybody volunteering to take a few articles. How do you want to work it?
I'm fine either way. If you're okay with me sharing, we can dive in.
Yeah. So yeah, why don't we, and let's talk about who's going to do what, and then we can dig into some of the discussion about some of the things that need doing.
Sure. So what I did under this category, if you filter on assigned committee member, that'll just pull up the one-offs or the rows that we'd want to talk about here. So I went through, and any place where we had heard from all of the folks we requested feedback from, and they didn't request any changes, and we haven't proposed any internally ourselves yet. Got this comment you see on Council on Aging. Said, really no need to assign it to one of us. There's been no requested changes so far. There were a handful of others, I think maybe 2 or 3, where none of us have proposed any changes yet. And either we haven't heard from some or all of the stakeholders. So I put a similar note on those saying, probably doesn't make sense to assign those to any of us yet until we hear back from whomever we're waiting on feedback from. So for Article 15, it's the select board. Article 30, select board. 38. I had the Agricultural Commission. That one might be cleared now, but that one's just waiting on EDC. And then waiting on CIPC for Article 41. So all of the others either have somebody's name if somebody's already claimed it, and or comments if we've already circulated proposed revisions, or any of the ones that are unassigned are the ones that we're are probably ripe for us to divvy up tonight.
Yep, and I'll just mention that Article 1, I've taken on one section of that, but there are several sections that we may divvy up amongst ourselves. Same with Article 12. There are quite a few sections in Article 12, and that's one that may end up being divvied up amongst several of us, different parts of it. So
Sure.
that may depend a little bit on how some of that plays out, where the actual revisions are likely to be needed. But for the most part, hopefully we can have each one of them assigned to exactly one of us. So do you want to like go down the list from the top? And
Yeah, that works for me. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any preferences or anything that they know off the top that they want to speak up for. Yeah, Dave, for Article 1, if we were going to split it up, I don't know if that was something that you had already put thought into for how we might do that, but I'm open to any suggestions.
yeah, I think probably we don't really know yet how many parts of that we're going to want to work on.
Yeah.
So I don't know how best to record it at this point. Maybe you can just, for simplicity's sake, assign it to multiple committee members and maybe note who has what section.
Sure.
But as we get farther into this, we might want to refine that a bit.
Sure.
I can probably take Article 3. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to suggest that maybe Greg takes Article 3. Article 4 is another one that I know there's a couple of items in there that I've got on my list of things I know need to be done. I don't know I mean, I could volunteer to take Article 4, maybe share it as necessary, but right now if there's not much, I haven't really looked at it yet to see what has to be done, but
Sure.
So I will kind of chime in because some of what's in Article 4 also goes to some of the stuff I've been talking about, where some records are kept
Contracts, yeah.
between there or the clerk's office or the accountant's office. And then there's some Massachusetts general laws that dictate where things are supposed to be kept. And,
yeah,
to a certain extent, some of this is like, if you kind of walk into the town hall and ask people, well, where is this? There's a lot of, what do you mean, where is it? It's, well, if I wanted a copy of something, where would I go to find it?
yeah.
And there's
So
some
maybe
long
we should
faces.
approach Article, right. So maybe we should assign Article 4 to Skip, and possibly others of us will work on it, on different parts of it as needed. But I'm good with saying, let's Skip on that for the moment.
Yeah.
And we definitely don't want to let Andy anywhere near select board. Yeah, I don't know how much is going to be done there, but it would seem to make sense for Andy to own that one for now.
I was just flipping through, and I think we had a casual off-air discussion about the bound book that it mentions in section 7, and if anybody knows if that exists or where or the last time it was updated. So that might be coming off, but yeah, it seems pretty buttoned up.
All right, some light lists.
And we've already got the next few assigned to Skip, already done.
Yeah.
I mean, everything, done at this point being, we've got at least a draft of, proposed revisions. All of this is subject to review and further change as we get deeper into it. But so who's gonna take on the assessors section?
I can take on 9 and 10. These should be pretty light lifts. Unless anybody has another preference.
I'm not gonna fight for it. 12 is gonna be a kind of a complicated one. And we're not, I don't really know. It's a long article, 20 some sections to it. And I'm looking at the one right now for the, section 21, but the rest, there's gonna be more work to do there. I don't know. Maybe we leave it unassigned for now until we figure out how best to parcel it out. Kind of like Article 1.
It looks like you just volunteered.
One section at a time.
Yep, if you want a note like that, if you want to put up under Article 1 that I am reviewing section 9.
Yeah.
All right, earth removal, Article 13. Don't know if anything's going to be done with that, but I think we did have a few comments on that.
I know I had a minor typographical comment in there, so I could take that one.
All right,
And 16 as well. So I had a comment on 18, but it's been resolved by the clerk as a clerical error. So there
Yep.
was a place where we said $1 and then in parentheses
Right.
$5, and that's been fixed. So we might be good here. I don't know if any other
yeah, what we haven't yet,
any.
I mean, this is one of quite a few that may be affected by what we ultimately decide to do about penalties and non-criminal disposition, but
Okay.
that's a topic that spans quite a few different bylaw articles, and so whoever takes responsibility for a bylaw article, I mean, either makes those edits or we do everything else and then go back and do the penalty stuff. I don't know how we're going to approach that yet, but
yeah.
So other than penalties, we can, if there's nothing on house numbering, we can leave that as no changes known at this time, except for a broad brush on penalties.
I think, let's see.
Dave, I had a couple of things on Article 18 that needed to be addressed, so I could kind of take care of that. There's some places
Oh,
where it makes
yeah.
reference to stuff, and it's like, like the first line says, accordance with the following plan, but there's no plan anywhere.
So there is some work
So
to be done there.
it does need to, what exactly are we shooting for here? And are we going to pay any attention to this? Statement about penalties.
Yeah, I guess it probably would be best if we did.
Yeah, put me on for 18. I don't care.
Yep. Seeing as how there are some things that may need doing.
And it might just be easier to stick to this view so we can see what other comments are out there. So for 19, didn't look like we're open feedback from the select board, no changes from the DPW, and Dave and Skip, looks like you each had a comment. But shouldn't be much going on there.
Yeah, again, that's something I can take on 19. My question is going to be kind of going to say, okay, what exactly, where do we want to go with this?
Yeah.
That's the problem is, what is this meant to talk about? Because if you look at the whole thing and you start thinking about it, you really start to scratch your head. So I will kind of do something with that too, to at least for us to.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, you read it, if you don't really pay attention to it, or, read it at a different time or something. It's strange.
Yes, I had the same reaction that it's a
So,
little bit odd. And the title of the article, Betterment Procedures, doesn't really reflect what the article is trying to say, at least as far as I can tell.
yeah, I agree.
Yes, there is a betterment procedure involved, but that's not the major topic. That's sort of incidental to what the article seems to be addressing.
Right.
So Article 20, the personnel bylaw, that's basically Evan is working on that, and if we're assigning it to committee members, then I suppose you would put my name in there as Evan's designee.
Yeah, Ryan, you should, in your, the feedback thing, just put down waiting for town administrator and date it. That way Dave doesn't even start looking at it for 20,
Yeah, no, if you put me,
right next to his date. Yeah,
put my name on it, I'm not going to look at it until
until after
Evan
he's
gets
done
moving.
with it.
Yeah.
It what winds up happening with what we're doing right now with this spreadsheets, somewhat of what I was talking about quite some time ago, was wishing that we had a shared drive space to have this. Would you mind sending this around, Brian, afterwards?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll send this out right after the meeting.
Okay.
So the reason we had talked about not having it in a shared space is due to OML issues if we start having debates in there. So
Yeah, it was not debate. It's just we
Yeah.
know what we decided after the last meeting, who's working on what.
yeah, having a copy is fine.
right, sharing a copy around is having it in a shared space that everybody can update makes it possible for us to be deliberating by way of updating the shared document in between meetings. And I think that's your point, Greg, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Article 21, the Grafton Common Historic District.
I can take that.
Dave, I've got this as open for both EDC and the Historic District Commission. I think this is the one where we had received a response from the Historic District Commission that, was about a different
Right,
bylaw amendment and not necessarily on point, but I don't know if we've given up on whether or not we'll be hearing back, or getting a different response from them, but it's at least still open on
Right.
EDC.
I'm not going to expect them to respond any further.
Yeah.
I did reply to them saying that their response was to a completely different bylaw.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder to them, and I think I take their subsequent silence as being they have no further comments on this.
Yeah.
However, if we do make any changes at all to this, we will ask them to review what we are proposing to be changed, as we will for everybody.
Sure.
Obviously, once we get it all, get a whole bunch of changes laid out, this is what we think we want to do. We're going to go back to every one of the stakeholders and say, look at this and see if you agree with what we are proposing.
Yeah.
So we're going to rope them back into it and for further comment at some point.
Sure. Greg's taking care of 22. 23 was one of the ones that I said not applicable. We haven't received any feedback and we haven't proposed any changes ourselves.
Right.
24, Dave, I think you had claimed in a prior meeting.
Yes.
Oh, 22 is not one that I'm doing. Silver Lake.
No, I've already done that one.
Okay.
And we sent out the that revision
The 20.
last
Yep.
month.
Okay.
Yep, Greg took took it upon himself to combine Silver Lake and Lake Ripple. And I think actually that was sort of in line with what Recreation was thinking as well. But yeah, that's basically done. The wetlands bylaw, that's me as well.
Yeah.
And so far, the only actual changes to the wetlands bylaw are going to be around publication of meeting notices, possibly penalties.
So the next unassigned is 26 licenses and permits. I can take this one.
All righty.
Biomedical research. So we're still waiting on EDC and select board comments. The only one of us that had any comments or questions on this was something that Andy had submitted.
Yeah, so seeing as how this is largely the Board of Health's territory on biomedical research, if they're not requesting any changes and none of us have seen anything that we think needs to be changed, although, let me see. There is a question I have in there on Article 27 regarding public notice. There, it's very vague on public notice, and I'm thinking we may need to, put some language in there about public notice in local newspapers and sort of align that with our other public notices. So I'll take that one for what little we're likely to be doing with it.
Greg had taken 28A, and I know Greg had circulated some proposed revised language from the town administrator. Greg, I didn't know if you were planning on circulating anything else on that, or I think if we're just going to go with the town administrator's proposed changes.
I think we'll just go with the proposed. We might want to add something that pursuant to chapter 4 of whatever of the act. So in other words, where he says to be consistent with the chapter 415 of the Acts of 1987, it might be worth putting that into
the language. Sure.
So pursuant to chapter 415 of the Acts of 1987, no member or officer shall continue in service beyond the last day of the month in which they attain the age of 65. Something like that. So yeah, that's fairly straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing that I think should go in there is I know there has been some discussion about, oh, well, is it the month you turn 65, the year you turn 65, or what?
That's in that sentence. Beyond the last day of the month.
Oh, you've already sent a thing around for that one?
It's right there on the screen.
Oh, okay, all right. No, okay, so I'm trying to follow along in the book and then. All right.
And I know we've talked about numbering. Were we going to leave this as 28A, or are we going to change it to 28 while we're
I think we had said we don't want to renumber
touch
things.
anything else?
Right. I have a good spot for discussing one of my clerk things here. The town apparently is working on codification to eliminate the apparent mistypings or whatever you want to call it, or stray wording that we've come across here. So that should also help out in the event that some people want to change numbers of any of this stuff. there'll be lines in places, however they're working the codification process. You'll be able to refer to the thing by the exact space and however it's codified. You know, such as the bylaws will have lines in them and each line will be numbered. So you won't be able to lose stuff as we have in the past.
Yeah, that topic came up in my conversation with Evan the other day, and he said that's something that it's been in the works for several years, and he's hoping that eventually it will actually get done. So
29 is all set with the combination to 22. The work Greg's done. 30, I have
That one
NA
should,
sorry, go ahead.
that one shouldn't be NA because we have feedback from the fire chief.
Yeah, that's true. I can take this one. I think some of the others. Open burning should be all set.
Do we have a? Oh, never mind. I see it now.
let's see. Town administrator, I suppose, as the town administrator's designee, I should take that one. Shade tree.
Shade tree.
I've been looking at that. It correlates closely with the scenic roads bylaw. So shade tree and scenic roads kind of live together. And I'm gonna want to have a conversation with the DPW director and the tree warden about the combination of scenic roads and shade tree. Because there's some funky things in there that need to be clarified and resolved. Community preservation is done.
Yeah.
Affordable Housing Trust, I've claimed that one.
No request.
Water management. There have been no requested changes, but that's another one where I think we're going to be doing some work on that regarding public notices of hearings and things like that. So then that also kind of correlates closely with the wetlands protection bylaw, so it would make some sense for me to look at those two together.
Illicit discharge.
I mean, I'd be willing to look at that if no one else wants it.
But some of these things come in multiple articles.
There's some relationship between Article 37 here and one of the sections of Article 12.
Dave, are you thinking the disposal of polluted materials, section 4 of Article 12?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Is there anything that you want me to add notes for or anything in the file or?
For now, just the fact that we've got in our action item list, we've got that that one line under Article 12, Section 4, saying it may relate to Article 37. For the moment, I think that's a sufficient reminder.
Okay.
I mean, this again is one of those things, one of those aspects of Article 12 that may end up with all of us working on different parts of Article 12.
Yeah.
So if I'm claiming Article 37, I could claim Section 4 of Article 12 for what it's worth. Oh, I've already got one, so. Okay,
Yeah, I think we said that's one of the ones we'll probably split up more in the future.
yeah.
So 38.
38, we
So
have,
38,
no
pending any
requested
feedback from EDC. I don't think we have any comments.
right. 39, that's me. I've got my revisions just about done.
Revolving accounts. Got a couple comments back from Mary.
I can take that. And 41 as well.
Do we want to Skip? I know you've had some interest in Appendix A. I think, do we want to hold off on this one until we see what the town administrator does with it?
Yes, if he is going to work on syncing it up with the charter, because there's some charter stuff about Appendix A as it relates to the Public Works Department. And I believe that will kind of dovetail into new position. I think the idea is that, like, the deputy police chief falls under this, where he's not mentioned anywhere else. I'm not sure, and the same thing could be said of Mary Lauria's job, because neither of those two exist anywhere. And I'm kind of thinking that this is where they go. If
Yeah,
not,
it probably is. Again, in my conversation with Evan, I pointed out the business with Appendix A and that charter section that deals with it, and so he took that on and said he's going to work on that.
okay, maybe I'll reach out to him and talk to him about that. Say, hey, this was our concern about this. Are we going to, before we get to the Appendix A, I guess, add some place because Mary submitted a request to put the finance director in, add a bylaw for that position.
Yeah, that ties into my work on Article 1, Section 9, the list of appointments. And I've been working on that, and I have some questions that at this point remain unanswered. But yeah, I've been looking at those lists of appointments from the select board, from the town administrator, and that's appointments of officers and boards and committees. And so that kind of ties into, ties into what I'm studying now in terms of appointments, and what state law says, what the charter says, what the bylaws say. And for the most part, it seems that the charter pretty much gives free rein to the town administrator to appoint officers and to organize departments. And so it's not clear to me that the bylaw needs to mention the finance director. It may be that shows up in Appendix A and doesn't need to show up anywhere else. Not sure about but that's that's part of what I've been looking at for the whole list of appointments question.
Yeah, because we had originally started off thinking we could just can this because we didn't see a need for it to be there. And then in further review, it seems that
Yep.
this Appendix A kind of does need to be there and needs to be synced up
Yep. Appendix A, it's
with
technically
the charter,
not
at least
part
the
of the,
way
right, technically it's
the
not
Public
part of
Works
the
Department
bylaws.
reads.
Yeah, Appendix A is supposed to be there as the publication of the current administrative code. And it's obviously not the current administrative code today.
And Dave, given that I think we had heard from, I think it was the email exchange with town council where, this isn't, gotten confirmation that this really isn't even, part of the bylaws itself. Do we even know? I suppose we can look at anything, so it doesn't necessarily need to be within the purview of anything, but would we need to bring it to town meeting, if we wanted to make changes here? It's not part of the bylaws. It might be within Evan's purview to make changes here, and obviously the charter outlines, how and when that needs to be presented to the select board and along those lines.
Right. According to the charter, the administrative code, which is to be published as an appendix to the bylaw, but not part of the bylaw, town meeting does not need to vote on Appendix A per se. However, the charter does say that the administrative code prepared by the town administrator is to be put to a vote of town meeting. So independent of the bylaws as such, Appendix A does end up getting a vote of the town meeting, but not necessarily concurrently with the rest of the work we're doing in the bylaws. Clear as mud, right?
So yeah, so like I said, I think we'll skip, unless you wanted to claim it in the interim. I think we can just leave this one as unassigned until we hear back
Yeah.
from town
Yeah,
administrator.
leave it parked, and I'll talk to Evan a little bit about it. Kind of see what he's dreaming up.
And then the last two were just a couple proposed new bylaws for us to consider. Didn't know if we wanted to, work through what we've got first and circle back to these at the end, or if there was anybody that wanted to claim, owning either or both of these.
Yeah, I think I remember, Brian, you saying that you would do some research into noise bylaws.
Yeah, I've got some interest here, and whether or not we end up picking it up and running with it, I think there's still some question there, but yeah, I'd be fine with owning some research here.
Yep, and the lockbox bylaw, we need to get the fire chief in, and if I can remember to do so, I will invite Eric to our next meeting, because he wanted to talk about the lockbox bylaw with us.
Sure.
So for now, until we decide to do something with it, it's just as well left unassigned.
Yeah, so there are some other towns that have lockbox bylaws, so we have some things to pull from if we need to.
Yep. And all right, so we've got everything pretty much assigned here.
Yeah, I think it's just 1 and
Yeah.
12, which I don't know if we want to leave those as unassigned, and as we kind of tick off sections through work in other areas, kind of see what's left after working through those.
And that's probably just as well for now.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, so I'll circulate this back out to the group after the meeting.
All right. So now that we've all got our work assignments, next week we'll have it all done, right?
Of course.
So there was a couple of items that I sent out to you guys for review and consideration as to, these are not to the level of, saying, here's what we need to do, but more, here's what we have to look at. One is the list of where all in the bylaws we talked about publication of meeting notices or hearing notices in a local newspaper or in something that's not specified. So that gets to the topic, we've been talked about this off and on over since we've started meeting that we'd like the bylaws to be a little bit more consistent in terms of referencing where these legal notices should be published. And sort of the obvious point is, in addition to publishing in a local newspaper, we probably want to say publish on the website. The charter takes care of it for the charter by simply defining, essentially, when we say local newspaper, we mean local newspaper and the town website. And that's probably what we can do here in the bylaws. I think one of us, I don't forget who it was, suggested in Article 1, putting
Yep.
something in there to basically say, whenever we say local newspaper, we mean a print paper as well as the town website. And beyond that, some of the review that I circulated pointed out, and I mentioned a couple of instances where sometimes in the bylaws we talked about publishing a notice, but we really want to say where, or we use different terminology. So what we probably want to do is to look those over and recommend some changes to be more consistent in our language. And again, this is something that we can probably best, simplest to add an item in the section 1 comparable to what we did in the charter regarding the website. So just take a look that over and see if let's sort of see what we can agree on as to what we want to do where. But I'm just since I just sent that out yesterday.
Yep.
I'm not expecting everyone to have looked through all that and reached any conclusions yet, but it was really shared for the purpose of starting our discussion on that, and that's probably something that we can wrap up pretty quickly, once we look through everything. The other item is a little bit more involved, and that's the question of penalties and criminal versus non-criminal disposition. There are a lot of places in the bylaws where we talk about penalties. Some places we talk about non-criminal disposition. In a few of those places, we really don't do that right, because non-criminal disposition requires a specific penalty and it requires an enforcing officer to be identified. There's a couple of places where we don't quite meet that. Beyond that, the police chief has asked us to consider non-criminal disposition in general. And we probably want to end up looking through all the bylaws, looking for inconsistencies that can be cleaned up, looking for opportunities to align the two forms of penalties, criminal and non-criminal, identify places where we might want to include non-criminal disposition where we don't now have it. And I think ultimately that's going to require a good deal more thought. We probably all start out at least with different opinions on that. And those of us who've been around long enough can remember more than once proposing non-criminal disposition at town meeting and getting it shot down. So at least in the past, it's been a controversial topic. In more recent years, it's kind of flown by without comment. But while we could simply say all of our bylaws can be enforced by non-criminal disposition, we could conceivably have trouble with the public on that. So I don't really know what to expect these days.
Is there any, do you know why there was pushback in the past?
I'm not sure I know. I'm sure I don't know all the reasons why. At least part of it is a concern that it's too easy. It's basically writing a ticket and you're guilty until proven innocent. And some folks were kind of uncomfortable with that general principle. Although in practice, you're not going to have a whole bunch of, town offices, the health agent, the conservation agent, the police chief, DPW staff. They're not going to be going around and writing tickets for every little thing that they hypothetically could. But that is the one concern that I can remember from years ago, that we don't want to give our town employees the ability to just easily go out and hand out tickets and make us pay $50 every day.
Oh, Dave, I can answer from, that was proposed for Board of Health stuff while I was on the board. And we emphatically said, no, we didn't want to have anything to do with non-criminal disposition. If people violated what we had under our purview, we had no intention of debating with anybody whether it was going to be resolved in a criminal fashion or just writing a ticket that we really couldn't do anything with. You write somebody a ticket for $50 for housing code violations or violations of stuff under the town's bylaw, and they just say, yeah, have a nice day. And we intended to continue to work where that stuff belonged, I guess is a way of saying it.
Yeah, so to that point, and I think that's a good point of view and a good point, that wherever non-criminal disposition could conceivably be applied, where it's not today, it would be entirely appropriate to ask the officer or board which would be enforcing that if they want to be able to use non-criminal disposition. And I guess I would, to go along with that, Skip, I would say I wouldn't put it in where no one wants to be the enforcing authority for it. Because kind of by default, the enforcement of bylaws generally is the select board files a complaint in district court to pursue it. And that's kind of a high bar that, it's got to be something pretty serious if we're going to take someone to court to enforce it. So yeah, so that's a good way to look through it. Look through the list, and any place you think might be worth considering non-criminal disposition where it's not currently there. We can identify who would be the enforcing authority, because that can vary quite a bit. But who would be enforcing it if we put it in, and then go and ask them, is this something you want to do? And if you don't want to get into that, then we don't want to make you get into it, right?
Correct.
So Dave, are we saying currently, so for everything that you've got in the criminal penalty column, for those to actually be enforced, it would need to go to the select board bringing this to a court action?
That's my understanding.
So for every violation under Article 11 for the inspector of wires, the select board would have to institute a court action to collect a $20 fine?
If I understand things correctly, that seems to be exactly true. Which makes one wonder, why do we even talk about a penalty here? Maybe we have to, but
right.
In 1957, when people were just going and doing stuff, they set the price for not doing stuff right at $20, and that was probably a week's pay for an electrician.
yeah, and that reminds me too that generally speaking, going back to Article 1, Section 6, it says all violations of these bylaws for which the bylaw doesn't specify any more specific penalty, But generally speaking, if you violate a bylaw and that bylaw doesn't have its own penalty, it's $50. It's a $50 penalty, and yes, the select board has to take that to court for that $50. Yeah, it does give you a cause to think, how much sense does it really make for some of this? But and yes, a non-criminal disposition is much easier. If you want a practical way to enforce these bylaws in general, to have some halfway usable teeth to it, you would go with non-criminal disposition. But then you're the bad guy. Well, yeah. If the select board can be the bad guy, the select board is going to take you to court. Well, that's easy to blame the select board. But if it's the building inspector or the animal inspector or a DPW director or a highway superintendent, yeah, they just might not want to be involved in that. And I wouldn't blame them. So that's food for thought. And yeah, it did occur to me too, to inquire of those people that are currently involved, that currently have the authority to use non-criminal disposition. How often do you actually use it? Do you think it's worthwhile?
Right.
So that's separate from the question of, you don't now have non-criminal disposition available to you, would you want it?
Right.
I'd be interested in both, but particularly I'd be interested in hearing what has our actual experience been with non-criminal disposition. Is it enough just to have it on the books and we never actually use it?
Well, that was my question. Do we have any experience with it?
That's a good question. Where's my note on that?
You know,
I can imagine the fire chief or the fire department's issued citations for under the open burning bylaw, just as an example.
Yeah, so all of the enforcing officers currently listed in the bylaws are the police, the Board of Health, a Board of Health agent. Those are both specifically for the Board of Health smoking regulations and not more general. There is a director of public health, who I'm not sure who that is, for either the plastic bag or the polystyrene bylaw, I forget it. The dog officer has non-criminal disposition authority, the fire chief, the tree warden, Conservation Commission and their agent, and the Department of Public Works. So those are all the people or entities that currently have enforcement authority under non-criminal disposition. It'd be interesting to see if any of them have ever actually used it and what they think. So unless you guys have any other thoughts in this direction, that's one I will reach out through Evan, I think, to see if I can get some feedback for us on the current use of non-criminal disposition.
I think, Dave, that you might find the fire department was issuing open burning stuff under this. My question would be, if the open burning needs to be changed, because in my impression, the only tickets that ever would have been valid were if they were given out by the fire chief himself, because it doesn't say or designee, or it doesn't say or assistant fire chiefs or anything like that. So we might want to reach out to Eric on Article 31 to see if they want to add, fire chief, or their designee as somebody that can actually write a non-criminal disposition open burning ticket.
Yeah, let me make a note of that. Yeah, because right now, the enforcing authority for open burning is either the fire chief or a police officer.
Correct.
And I think that that's a good question. Should we expand that to give the authority to a designee of the fire chief, whether it's a whatever he thinks would work? So we've got all that. Anything else on we need to discuss tonight on the topic of bylaw updates?
CIPC's next meeting is January 31st, and we will be discussing the bylaw at that meeting.
Oh,
So
excellent.
it will not be ready before our next meeting.
But yeah, I dare say that's not likely to be a problem. We've got enough work to do without that. And
Yep.
and I rather suspect that CIPC is not going to have much in the way of proposed changes. Whatever.
ClearGov has kind of changed things a bit. So I think we're going to be updating the bylaw to deal with changes in procedures due to change in procedures of how the departments work with the town administrator on getting that done. So there'll be some that and maybe some timeline stuff. It's
Yep,
about what's
well,
going to be there. What
yeah.
we should expect there.
Right. Other than what CIPC is likely to see that they need, there's probably nothing else that's going to affect it. And if there is, it's it's whatever. We've got time to get all this nailed down. So with that, if there's nothing else, the next agenda item we have is the committee's annual report for the annual town report. I sent you out a draft, the proposed report, and the committee can either approve it as written or suggest improvements.
So I have two suggestions, Dave, that we include something to pat ourselves on the back a little bit, or to explain the difficulty in doing this and saying this is supposed to be done every 5 years and it hasn't been done for 20.
Yes. I
And
like
the
that.
other thing might be to say that we've met X number of times so far this, in the calendar year
Yes.
in pursuit of our charge.
I've got 11 meetings in 2022.
Sounds about right. Yeah, so yeah, I'd put in there the committee held regular meetings, but I don't know why it didn't occur to me to actually count the number of meetings, but that's easy. And then I love your idea, Skip, of pointing out that this hasn't been done for 20 years. And it's a lot of work because of that. Any other suggestions?
At the bottom where we are quasi signing, I'd propose bumping Greg up the pecking order and adding his title of vice chair.
Yes, thank you. I was going to do that, and then that slipped my mind. By the time I got done writing, that totally slipped my mind.
And do we want to list Ray as a past member of the committee? Although he's not submitting the report, so I don't know if it would be appropriate or not.
Yeah, he didn't do anything anyways. The hell with him.
Yeah, it's probably worth acknowledging Ray's participation as the select board representative for the first part of the committee's existence.
Maybe Dave, at the end of the second paragraph, we could comment on the select board representative was Ray Mead through X date. After which
Yeah.
was replaced by Mr. Jefferson.
I'll put that in there. And anything else? Would you like to see the revised draft at our next meeting before it's approved for submission to the office?
I move absolutely not.
I move that we approve the report of the bylaw study committee as written by Dave, subject to the adjustments mentioned in the meeting.
Second,
Moved and seconded. Any discussion of that motion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Courier,
Just have to find the unmute button. Aye.
Mr. Langevin,
aye.
Mr. Jefferson,
Aye.
Mr. Marr,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. And then we have one more agenda item being the, where's my agenda? Oh, yes, previous meeting minutes, the minutes of our December or whatever meeting. Ryan sent those out a day or so
15th.
ago.
I move we approve the December 15th minutes as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Courier.
Aye.
There. I saw the lips move. It looked like an eye. Mr. Jefferson,
Aye.
Mr. Langevin,
Aye.
Mr. Marr,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. I actually got all the names in alphabetical order by last name that time. I usually tend to go by how they show up on my screen, but anyway, motion carried unanimously. The minutes are approved. And with no further business, a motion to adjourn might be in order.
So moved.
Second,
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Mr. Courier,
Aye.
Mr. Jefferson,
Aye.
Mr. Langevin,
aye.
Mr. Marr,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.